All right, everyone, it's time to talk about the South Carolina primary. We finally have the numbers in, and of course, Super Tuesday is a couple of days away, I believe. I believe voting is on the 3rd. So at that point, we'll probably know who the nominee is or whether we're going to end up with an extremely messy contested convention style thing. It's looking more like the latter because Joe Biden did well. He managed to completely clobber Bernie Sanders, actually. It's funny because a little bit of campaigning there paid off, even though everyone had written him off. Like, at some point, you're like, well, I mean, the dude's demented. He doesn't really have traction. He got humiliated in Iowa. The writing's sort of on the wall. The problem is Biden was a weak front runner to begin with, and now Bernie Sanders is a front runner, but he's also weak. Think about it. He barely won in New Hampshire. He only gains a technical win in Iowa because Pete Buttigieg got more delegates. He manages to do well in Nevada, but then Biden has done the same thing fundamentally now in South Carolina. You have a weak front-runner whose front-runner status is largely only because somebody else fell down, not because he himself lifted himself up and gained a larger core of voters. He's managed to add a few points, but as we see, that can be very fickle. It'll be interesting to see if this tilts the race, though, in any other direction, because on Super Tuesday, his lead is large enough, at least in most of the states, that Bernie Sanders should sweep more than half the states. If, though, Joe Biden manages to get at least 2 or 3, he remains viable. He will pressure everyone else to drop and endorse him, so will Bernie Sanders, and they'll try to make it a two-person race. In a war of attrition one-on-one, I would favor Biden. The problem is that there is a split vote there. We have to see which one weakens the candidate more. The fact that Joe Biden has to deal with Bloomberg, who's not draining any votes away from Bernie Sanders, let's fucking face it. That fact, because Bloomberg will not drop out. He's completely self-funded. He's in it to win it, even though he's not going to win, and he's just nuts. He's basically the chaos candidate. Does that weaken him more, or does being a socialist weaken you more? That's what we're going to have to see, because I think that Bernie Sanders has a very, very low ceiling. I think that the average Dem voter cannot back a socialist unless there's no other option. If, therefore, Biden is seen as viable, or Bloomberg is in the race, they'll have somebody else to vote for. That could lead easily to a contested convention because Sanders would probably win anyway, but he'd be well below the threshold he would need. The superdelegates might even pitch a fit. It'll be anarchy. The Dem convention this year could be the most spectacular stupidity we've seen in modern politics. This could be just as bad as back in the 60s when the Democratic convention was protested by hundreds of thousands of hippies. It could end up like that. We could see riots, by the way. Milwaukee really needs to consider beefing up its paramilitary capabilities beforehand. They should probably already be preparing for riots in the streets because Antifa leftists will probably show up and burn cars if Bernie Sanders isn't nominated Führer of the party. Anyway, I would say this. Biden won by a large enough margin, I think. In fact, I think he outperformed somewhat the polling. I think that he won big enough to remain viable. Therefore, Biden should not drop out. If he had come in just ahead of Sanders, instead of winning almost 50%, Sanders is down in the mid-teens, that'd be a different story. So Biden should stay in. Warren came in 5th. She should drop out. Biden should already be approaching you saying, what the fuck are you doing? At some point, you got to put your ego aside. Sorry, you just didn't cut it. Maybe you can be my running mate, though, so why don't you fucking just endorse me? I bet she's getting offers from both parties, from both camps at the moment. Probably Bloomberg's approached her too. I don't think that would ever happen. Klobuchar got humiliated again, came in 6th. Gabbard is in last place. I don't understand why she doesn't drop out. Because her I'm a moderate who hates guns shtick, her I'm a cute surfing mom shtick, is sort of like the Buttigieg effect, only, she can surf. That thing was maybe charming for a while. At this point, though, it's time to allow the adults to talk. And Elizabeth Warren, Amy Klobuchar, Tulsi Gabbard, they're not adults. They're baby candidates, essentially. None of them have viability. Klobuchar will not be nominee. Warren will not be nominee. Steyer definitely will not be nominee. Gabbard never was possibly going to be nominee. There's no reason for them to remain in. At this point, they're not even really gaining anything from it. Like before, maybe you get a book deal or something. At this point, though, it's dragged on long enough that people are focused only on the front runners. This is basically a 3-person race. Bernie Sanders is the front runner, albeit a weak one. Biden is the main challenger, who was the front runner and probably will regain that status at some point if he manages to gain enough states on Super Tuesday so that it's possible for him to become the front runner, possible that he'll be close in viability. I think he wins in a war of attrition. And then Bloomberg, simply because he's going to remain in the race because he's too dumb to drop out. Bloomberg doesn't care. He's already pissed off. He's literally pissing off Democrats just by existing at the moment. He also had his hard peak, so he's not viable. If he were, though, to drop out and endorse, I think he would endorse Biden. And I think it'd be funny, because then Biden might end up not gaining really much by that, because for every voter that would say, oh, well, thank goodness Bloomberg backs him so I can vote for him, he'd have one person that would say, I'll never vote for you because if Bloomberg likes you, I hate you. This is great. I love this race. So yeah, there's a little bit of analysis. Like at this point, though, the cutoff for viability maybe a few weeks ago was different than it is now. Buttigieg is just barely on the line, and that's just because he got an early delegate boost from doing well in the first couple of states. He gets that boost. He did do well. He has a technical win in Iowa, although not by popular vote. He has a delegate win. He comes in very, very close second in New Hampshire behind Sanders. That arguably means more. The fact that Sanders performed poorly in New Hampshire, barely winning in a state right next to Vermont, that does matter, by the way, Bernie fans. I hate to tell you this, but that does matter significantly. That means that technically Buttigieg is in that circle of viability, but not really. On a national stage, he's in, what, 5th place again? Bloomberg sort of rounds out the top of the field. So it looks like that the remnants in the race will all be old white males. It's going to be 370-something white males that are running, all of which are rich and intrinsically part of the political establishment for a very long time. Biden's been in office since the 70s, on and off, for the most part. He's been VP, he's been a senator, and so forth. Bernie Sanders has been in the legislature for, 20 years. Before that, he was mayor of Burlington for a long time. He's been in politics since the 70s. They're both, by the way, in their 70s. They're both, by the way, rich comparatively. And then you have Bloomberg. That's self-explanatory. He's old and rich and has been in and out of politics for a long time. Even when he's been a private citizen, he's been intrinsically involved in New York politics. It's not like he was an unknown fucking face. He was part of the investor class. He's sort of like a Trump. Trump was part of the investor class behind politics. So it looks like the Dem field is going to be 3 geriatric white dudes. The thing is, the thing that gives Bernie Sanders his particular strength in such a field is that he happens to be a socialist, so it pisses off the young, out-of-touch, give-me-stuff vote, bless. The Antifa vote. I don't see good things ahead for the Democrats. The Bernie Sanders revolution sort of bullshit, really, it's not a revolution, dude. It's some echo chambers on Twitter and Reddit and places like that talk up a lot about him, but we saw this before. We saw this in the 2016 election. It didn't pan out. This time he might manage to be nominee, but he's still going to get fucked. A lot of the Democrats, I don't even think will back him. They'll say, look, this dude wasn't even a Democrat a couple of years ago. And he's a socialist. We're not a socialist party. What do you expect me to do? And a lot of people will sit it out and they'll say, nope, we're just not, we'd rather Trump win. You'll probably see the rise of an anti-Bernie in-party candidate. Like a shadow Democrat sort of thing. They'll try to, it'll fail, obviously. It's still going to be between Sanders and Trump at that point. But I don't think Sanders would win. I think if you thought that the Never Trump stuff was fantastical and hilarious, wait till you see the Never Bernie vote. It'll exist. Trump's not quite as hated among the average independent voter as some people think. His approval's in the mid-40s right now. It ticked down a little bit, but it's still near that high. It's very, very funny to me to watch these things. That's about all. Peace out.